Honestly, I feel like it's been 2 months since I've done a YouTube video. That's a long time. Okay, but anyway, today we have a very special guest. Hi! We have Farah with us today, who I'm sure most of you who watch my videos will know exactly who this is. That's it. That's a wrap. We're just two consultants just blown away by the wind. I can't do it. Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Tanvi, and today we are joined by
Farah. What were you saying?
I was going to say the one and only.
Oh, okay, I'll let you
We'll start again. Okay, today we are joined by the one and only Farah. Round of applause.
Hi guys, so I am Farah. I'm a full-time consultant at one of the big four, and I also do social media content creation on the side. So on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, pretty much any platform you can think of, I'm doing it.
Yeah, Farah is a full-time content creator and a full-time consultant, which as some of you will know, some of you won't, that was also me 2 months ago. So that's why we kind of connected on social media, and we've literally been friends ever since. I thought this would be such a good video to do because even though I have now left the corporate world, between the two of us, we have actually been at 3 out of the 4 big fours. So we're literally working our way through them. And we also came from different industries. So I'll let Farah get into hers, but lots of you will know I was in audit and transitioned into consulting, and Farah,
I was in tax and transitioned into consulting.
we've covered a lot within the big four, so we thought this would be like a very good video to just give you an all-rounded view of like where we came from, how we transitioned into consulting, and our views on lots of important things within the big four. So yeah, any disclaimers?
Well, everyone's experiences are personal to them. Like, you're not gonna get 2 people that have the exact same experience, whether they've worked at the same firm, worked in the same service line, so that's always something to be aware of. So don't ever take someone else's experience as like gospel, and that's exactly what's gonna happen if you end up working there. But I think it's still good to know what other people's experiences are, how they dealt with certain situations, and how they navigated that world, because there are only 4 of the big 4, so they are quite similar. They have very similar cultures, so there are a lot of similarities, that quite a few differences, I think, I've heard.
Yeah, I think it also just depends on like your team.
Yeah.
So even for me, I have had people in the same industry, the same business unit, but we just had different clients and we've been on different teams and we've had polar opposite experiences. But these are just our experiences. When I was applying for the big 4, I wish I had people like this just sharing their own experiences, their true experiences, just talking about things within it. So that's what we're gonna do. Let's get into the video. Thought it'd be good to start with very quickly, like how you got into the big 4.
So in a nutshell, I actually did a summer vacation scheme at the firm I still work for now. It was in the same team that I then went into in my grad placement. So then I got a grad job offer from that vacation scheme. So I went back to finish uni, then I went to do that role. I did it for around 3 years before I transitioned into consulting, which is what I do now. And here I am almost a year later in consulting, and I'm in change management consulting at the same company.
So you stayed within the same company and transitioned from tax to consulting. So then for me, I did the audit grad scheme, which I'd got off the summer internship again. And then I did 3 years in that, and then I transitioned into consulting, but I actually moved from one big 4 to another. How did you move within your firm between tax to consulting?
Yeah, it's a weird story, and it's a bit of a long one, so I'll try and summarize it. But essentially for me, I think it was a little bit easier doing it internally, just because I was very much able to like connect with people that were already in that team that I wanted to get into, because I had the contacts quite easily. I think when you're going externally, it's quite hard to find the exact people in the role that you want to be like applying for example. So I took a lot of time into like making sure I was speaking to the people in those teams, making sure that's actually what I wanted to do, because I still had to do interviews, I still had to do a lot to get that role. So I had to be prepared and had to show that I actually wanted it and why I wanted it.
How does it work in your firm? Because with my firm, there's only 2 times in the year that it's called the transfer window, and it opens up, and then basically you can apply for any other roles that are within the firm, but only when that transfer window is open. So other than that, you're kind of stuck where you are. How does it work? Like, how did it work for you?
So ours wasn't like that at all. Like, there's no set times of the year that you have to like choose when you're going to move
that's
out.
good.
It's just a case of knowing that there's a role available. So as long as they're like trying to recruit people externally for that role, you can apply internally, but you have to go through the same procedure as someone that is applying externally. So do all the interviews, and like the whole process is the same. It's just that you can do it as you were.
But then would you have to tell your internal team, so your tax team or your manager, hey, I'm just not enjoying tax, I'm looking to move? Did you have to have that conversation?
Yeah, so that is the awkward part of doing it internally. There's a whole extra like layer of like dealing with your existing team when it comes to like deciding what you want to do, because people talk, like people know.
Yeah, the big 4, even though it's
senior
massive,
people,
like it's very small.
Word gets around very quickly, but what's good is that they have coaches and like mentors, people that you regularly speak to about your career development. I'm sure it's like similar.
Yeah, same as us. And are they within your business unit at the time? Yeah, same as us. And then did you feel like they helped you with that move, or they made it difficult?
So my actual like mentor, like my personal, what are they called? People leader.
People coach? People person? Career coach?
We call them people
leaders.
leader.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was so helpful, and I think it is their job to make sure you're happy in your role, and it's their job to make sure that you're along the right career progression. Like, so if things aren't working for you, it's their job to help you fix that. So that is generally like the person you go to if you have any problems within your team, but also like if you're just trying to figure out what you actually want to do with your career. But I think what happens is you just go to whoever you feel most comfortable speaking to.
I agree with that.
It doesn't really matter if they're like the designated person that's meant to coach you through certain situations. If you don't feel that comfortable with them, there'll be someone else in your team that you do. But I think the important thing is that you do have the conversation with them first, because you end up in a bit of a sticky situation if you try and reach out to other teams and then it gets back to them.
I had a completely different experience, actually, in 2 completely different occasions. So one, in audit, everyone wants to leave audit, so they do try and make it really difficult for you to have those conversations or to move. So if you show any interest in wanting to leave, they already know, like, to almost, so if they find that a lot of grads are reaching the end of their grad scheme and they're hearing word that a lot of the grads are looking to leave audit, they will make it really difficult, and they will make less positions available during that transfer window period. So the year I finished my grad scheme was like literally as COVID hit. I finished my grad scheme in April 2020, and obviously COVID was in March. So they just froze the transfer window because they knew so many of us wanted to leave. So we either had to stick it out or we had to move externally, which is what I did. So they actually made it really difficult for people to leave audit. And then secondly, when I was in consulting at the second Big 4 firm, I wouldn't say they made it difficult, but I did a secondment with a deals advisory team for like 3 months. I worked with them and I had such an incredible experience. The senior manager on that team actually really liked me, and she was happy to help facilitate a move across. And I was told, and I hope none of them are watching this, but I was told to not have that conversation with my team, because if it didn't work out, then they would never have known that, you know, I was interested in leaving them. So I kind of had to wait till the right moment, that if it got to a point where I needed to tell them, then I should tell them. And it never did, because I resigned and I left anyway. So actually it was for the best, because I didn't ruin any relationships, unless they see this video.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But I think when you're a grad and you're just finishing, I think it's very common for people to want to leave. So if you are feeling that way, I would say it's better to be transparent.
There are some difficult teams, and I definitely had difficult individuals within my team that made it very difficult afterwards. Like, the whole process it was just made a bit of a nightmare by some individuals. So if you have a lot of people in your team that you know, and they're quite senior, because the more senior they are, the more impact that they're going to have.
Yeah, that is one thing about the Big Four, is like a partner can have the say to literally snap their fingers. If they like you, they can make it happen to give you a job. People don't realise that it is quite political, and it is a lot about who you know. So yeah, if a partner likes you and they tell the head of HR, look, we really like Farah and we want her in our team, there's not much HR can do about that other than be like, okay, like a lot of the time they do facilitate that. So it's really important to speak to the right people. And you said you spoke to so many people, right, before you know, applying or deciding to move. How did you even find the right people to speak to, or like how did you get in touch with them?
So I was quite lucky actually, because at the time that I left, there was a girl in the year above me who was literally my buddy throughout my like grad scheme, and she actually did the exact same move the year before me. So I already had someone that had gone through it, and I was obviously quite close to her being on the grad scheme and her having that buddy relationship with me, so I kept in contact with her after she moved over. And then I also came to realise afterwards that I already knew a lot of people in the team that I wanted to be in anyway by default. Like I knew them from uni, I knew them from other stuff I was doing.
That's quite unusual, yeah.
So I think I got quite lucky in the sense that I kind of had connections already, but if you don't, there's literally a network, at least I think all of the Big Four have it. There's a network where you can literally go on the intranet at that firm and type in a certain role, and a bunch of people will come up with that role.
Yeah.
So a lot of people like almost cold message other people. Like I've got a lot of messages in the past few years from people wanting to move teams, and they've seen that I'm in a particular team.
And I do feel like people are really willing to help. Like, I just think there's a culture at the Big Four, like especially if you've worked your way up, you're a bit more senior. Like most of the time, I would say 80% of the people there, if you send them a message, like they're more than happy to like have a coffee with you or have a conversation. And like Farah said, if you don't know someone, it can be a bit more difficult, but there will be someone that does know someone else. So just keep asking as many people, keep talking to as many people as you can, and someone will put you in touch with the right person. So just don't give up.
So something that's really important to do if you feel like you don't know anyone in other teams is to start networking early. Like you can, you don't have to network with your own team. There's loads of like social events that kind of like merge teams together sometimes, like based in your office, and there's a lot of like a wide variety of things to get involved with outside your day-to-day work. So I would encourage you to do that, especially if you're looking to move service lines and want to get connected to other people.
And I feel like a lot of grads go in thinking, I've got a 3-year grad scheme, like I don't need to worry about this now, but you will stand out so much. Not so much within your business unit, but when you're ready to move at the end of your grad scheme, if you've already got a huge network across all the different business units. And something they love is like cross business like collaboration.
Yeah, they love for you to like have that network because so then they can use it.
Yeah, like say one day like we've got an audit client and they've rolled off and we're not working for them anymore, but in the future you've brought in another client to do consulting work because you knew someone who was a consultant and had that specialism. That is like bringing in completely new business, and business development is like a massive gold star when it comes to Big Four. Those are the sorts of things that get you promoted early. So it's just so good to have a network across all your business units, even if you're not looking to move anytime soon. So that's such a good point. Okay, I wanted to also talk about now like the comparison. So obviously we've both moved from tax and audit to consulting. I would say there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences in terms of like the people, the well-being, the money. We just need to be truthful about all of that stuff, because these are the things that you don't really hear about on the careers websites or the adverts for all of these graduate schemes. So should we start with skill set and the type of work? Like what is the difference and what is the similarity between tax and consulting?
So I think in my experience, and I have to caveat this because there's so many different areas of consulting, so it just so happens that my two areas, like tax and the area I'm in, is like polar opposite, but it might not be the case in other areas of consulting. But for me, tax was so heavily technical. It was all about the numbers, it was all about like calculations and like legislation and rules, whereas consulting is like advisory based, so it's just like your thought partner to your clients. You're just advising them on like their business, and it's just a lot more like collaborative and a lot less technical. It's a lot more like wordy, so if you're the type of person that like kind of likes more discussion based brainstorming type scenarios, then that is like more what you do in consulting like day to day. There are definitely technical areas of consulting though, so like I wouldn't say that's just across the board.
I think I had some really technical areas. Yeah, I'll get into that, yeah.
So that's definitely not like a case for all areas, but just for me, there were complete polar opposites in that sense, because the work was like very, very different. And I think the work is different in general anyway, just because like in consulting, you're literally consulting the business. So you're just telling them your ideas on how you think they should change certain things, for example, whereas in tax, you literally have to follow legislation.
It's black and white.
Rules, yeah.
Right.
You're either right or you're wrong. With consulting, it's not like that. There's loads of different ways to do the same thing, and it's just about finding the most efficient and effective way to do that. So those are like the biggest like differences.
Yeah, I think it's quite similar for audit. Like audit, again, obviously very heavy in terms of regulation, and it's, I think, a bit more demanding is what I found. So something I found, which I didn't think I would, is that I was way more challenged in audit, not because of the horrendous hours and busy seasons, which you can watch my past videos on, but more like the actual work itself. Like as Farah said, tax and also audit was a lot more technical, so it was a lot more numbers driven, it was a lot more calculations, and at the time I didn't enjoy that because I'm a much more of a wordy person than a number person. But in hindsight, I didn't feel like with consulting I was actually challenged enough, which is interesting because I would have thought that with audit you're just finding problems, and with consulting you actually get to solve them. But I think the way Farah said it is so true. The consulting, there's no right and wrong way. Sometimes it is a bit more fluffy, sometimes it takes a lot longer to do things because there's no like hard deadlines, there's less pressure to like really get things done because you're almost working with the client. With audit, you're holding them accountable.
That's a huge difference actually. It's like there's no external, as in like legal deadlines. Whereas in consulting, if you're on a project, that client sets your deadlines. So it could be in the winter time, the summertime, it doesn't really matter. It's just completely dependent on that business.
Yeah, and quite often it's the consultant's interest to take their time with things and extend things, because at the end of the day, the longer that you're consulting for a client, the more income you're getting. Now, I'm not saying that people work slower, but I'm just saying there's less urgency.
Yeah.
Whereas with audit, it's like the 31st of March is when your financial statements need to be in for. You don't have a choice because it's going to be on the news in the morning. So it was a lot more kind of fast paced and a lot more pressurizing, which some people might like that sort of environment as opposed to things that are a bit more relaxed. But having said that, like there are definitely deadlines with consulting, and when it does get bad on certain projects, it can get really bad.
I think the stressful part of consulting is that you're generally working with a much bigger team. Like in consulting, what I found is that you honestly work with so many, you even work with the different service lines on like the same project, and you work with 1,000,001 different teams doing a separate part of that project, and you all have to come together and know what each other are doing and know what each of your deadlines are.
Like so many different moving parts in one vehicle.
And that can be like quite difficult to manage sometimes, and like making sure your deadlines match up, and because sometimes someone can't do their work without like you finishing yours, for example. So
but that's really interesting, because I think with audit I found that, but that's only because of my clients. So again, with audit and tax, it can completely vary based on who your clients are. So my clients were banks, and obviously they are like the largest financial institutions compared to maybe like a FTSE 250. As a result, our teams were literally 50 to 100 people, whereas like a FTSE 250 team might only be 5 to 10. So we definitely did have to work like with so many different people. We had teams in different countries. We outsourced to like India, Poland. A lot of the big four will do that because it's just outsourcing is cheaper.
Yeah.
So again, it massively depends on your team and your client as to how big your teams are. I mean, talking about the people, did you notice like a big difference in the type of people between tax and audit versus consulting?
I think in some ways yes, because I think like personality types are slightly different just because of the nature of the work. Like I think different personalities suit different types of work. So for example, in consulting, networking is such a huge deal compared to what I experienced in tax. Yeah, you have to network a lot more, which I think suits a more outgoing, like sociable type of person, because you have to put yourself out there to even get on the best projects, to like know who you want to work with next, because it's project based, so you're constantly changing your work, which is great for some people.
I think a lot of people don't know about consulting is that you get projects based on how good you are and who knows you, and if you don't have a project, you're on the bench. Whereas I think with tax and audit, because there's so much work that just has to get done.
Thrown stuff.
Yeah, there's more of a demand for work than there is supply of employees, so you will always have something to do. I think consulting, there can often be times where you're struggling.
You have to sometimes fight for like one role. Like if you want to be on a particular client and a particular type of project, you honestly have to have already created a name for yourself for them to want to pick you. Like it's not just going to be handed to you on a plate.
You definitely, it's a bit more competitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then talking about kind of like work-life balance, I mean, we touched upon it, but would you say one is significantly better than the other? I know what I'd say.
I think it's difficult because I've been in consulting for less than a year and I've only just started my second project, whereas I was in tax for 3 years. So there's obviously a big disparity in the amount of time I've spent in both. But I think consulting is definitely, because there are internal deadlines to the client and things get extended quite a lot, I feel like because of that there is slightly less pressure. Because you're not literally working to like a HMRC deadline where you're literally going to get fined. So people are automatically loads more stressed, and there's certain times of the year where you're just really strapped for time and you have to spend long hours. Whereas if you're coming up to your deadline in consulting, chances are they're just going to extend it.
It's probably going to get pushed back.
Yeah, so there's not as much urgency, like Tambi already said. So because of that, consulting is definitely less pressurizing, but it still can be pressurizing because at the end of the day there's still deadlines involved.
Yeah, I think it's just all relative, right? Like I think even consulting in a big four firm, it can have really challenging times, but I compare that to my busy seasons in audit where I was doing like 16-hour days, and I've not had a day like that in consulting once. So it just depends.
You know what's funny is that I honestly sometimes feel like there's people in consulting that I work with or I've just seen that get crazy stressed about their deadlines because that's like just the type of work they're used to, and obviously the deadlines that they're used to working towards. And then you realise that like when you've had the experience of having genuinely like really strenuous like, and they do work late nights as well, I'm not saying consulting is like that different in terms of like if you have to work late, you have to work late. That's just the big four. I don't think it really matters.
No, that is just the big four.
But there's some situations where I feel like consultants get really stressed about like certain things, and I'm just like, I don't feel that kind of pressure just because I've been in so much worse.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the well-being and work-life balance in consulting as a whole is a lot better. I think a lot of the time because your clients are just like regular companies or banks, like they go home at 5 or 6, and it's not like audit where you can be doing loads, you know, looking through their numbers and books offline when they've gone home. Like you need to be in direct contact with the client a lot, and so if they're not there, then you don't really have a reason to be there a lot of the time as well. I mean, there is obviously things that you can do when your client is
just the majority of it is very collaborative. I think like you just work together.
Exactly, so you kind of work to the same hours as well, so I think it is definitely a bit better on the mental health in consulting. And then the last thing I want to talk about, which I think a lot of people probably care about, is the salary and the pay. I, for one, would say that yes, there is a jump between audit to consulting, but I still think within the big four, because it is very sort of graded as a system, it's not that different. For example, if I were to move from audit to a consulting boutique firm, it would be more different than it is when I've moved internally within a big four firm.
Yeah, I get that. So if you're comparing directly, like just big four service line to service line, there was a huge jump for me. Like
really
huge jump. So I was really shocked at that because I think I was just a bit naive to the fact that like different service lines just get valued and like paid differently. I thought it was just equal across the board for some reason. Looking back, that seems really strange to think because they're different jobs. But I just thought big four, like you're getting paid roughly the same amount. So I was really shocked at that. But if you take big four out of the picture and you just look at consulting
versus
outside and consulting inside, it is pretty relative. I don't know, maybe big four is a bit less actually.
No, it's way less. It is way less
than what you'd get paid elsewhere.
But that's why a lot of people will do like a set number of years at the big four, then decide what they want to specialise, especially as a consultant, and then move, because that jump is huge. It's way more outside, especially in London. It might be different outside of London. I mean, maybe my salary jump wasn't as big because I already had a huge jump to do a qualified salary. So once you become ACA qualified, your salary pretty much jumps by 10k. So maybe my jump up to consulting wasn't as big, but I definitely think that's really interesting that between the north and south, the disparities in the salary aren't the same. Just for context, sorry, I worked in London.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we've mentioned that. Farah is in a regional office, so up north. And so, again, the salaries are different, but they're more reflective on the cost of living as well. I feel like this was just a very like general chit chat about the Big Four, about audit, about tax, about consulting, how we got into consulting, our views on it, because obviously we have seen both sides of the spectrum, and just like more insider information about the Big Four, because there just isn't enough out there.
I think definitely more people need to be talking about it. I think one thing that's quite frustrating is like when you're in the firm, you genuinely don't know, like things about pay and stuff is very secretive.
And like I don't regret ever going and starting my career at the Big Four. I would actually recommend people still do it, despite having some really challenging times, but I still would have loved to have known all of this before going into it, just so I could set myself up a little bit better.
Yeah,
that's
and
all
just
it
so
is.
you know what you're going into and how you can like approach or expect situations to pan out.
Yeah.
I think it's just good to know.
So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want us to do any more videos, whether it's Big Four related or completely irrelevant, then please just comment below. Again, go check out Farah's channels. I will link them all in the description. And we'll see you guys in our next video. Bye! Let's do a little count on our thing at the end, how many times we've done. And then secondly, when I was in consulting at the second...
So I essentially...
So I was way more challenged in audit, not because... Oh God, I can't do this anymore. So
compared to what I experienced in tax.
the cost of living as well.
Yeah, so